fascinating. I'm a doctor, not a mechanic.
Thank you, love you. Mwah.
Most illogical.
Aye, sir.
Well, that was different. Yep, lousy, but different.
Places, please, and here we go.
Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, bears, species 8472 and things. Episode 113 of the MuppeTrek Podcast. I'm Steve.
And I'm Jarman, and we're here to compare, contrast, and confer about our two favorite franchises. And what are those, Steve?
That's the Muppets and Star Trek. We've been doing one-to-one reviews of the Muppet Show and Star Trek The Next Generation.
And tonight we're covering the Muppet Show with special guest star Carol Burnett and Star Trek The Next Generation episode Haven.
But before we get to that sweet, sweet review, Jarman, here we have a sweet, sweet review of our own.
We have some feedback, and it's unfortunate feedback in the sense...
Oh, no.
But also very kind of a pleasant reminder from a friend of ours of the show, Ian Cohen, who I went to college with back in the day.
Ian Cohen.
Our old rocket scientist buddy.
Rocket scientist.
He actually commented that our last episode...
Crap, what we get wrong?
Of the MuppeTrek wasn't working. And I was freaking out. I was like, oh, did I do so there's a common mistake I sometimes make where I don't save it right or I don't publish it correctly. So I checked to make sure that wasn't the problem. It wasn't. So then I go into the feed of our podcast, both A Play on Nerds and MuppeTrek. And not only is the most recent episode working, none of our episodes are working. So I'm freaking out. I'm like, what happened? Is there a server malfunction? So I checked Squarespace, where our whole podcast is actually hosted from. That seems fine. I check our oldest episodes and that they aren't working. So I had to dig and find out why it wasn't happening. And it turns out, so what I do when I post the podcast is a little behind the scenes here real quickly, is that I put a link before the name of our file name it's basically you put in basically a tracker link. We use a site called PodTrack that keeps track of our statistics for our podcast to tell us how many downloads we get and stuff. Apparently that website at some point changed that link. And so since that link is changed, when anyone tries to access the MP3 file from any podcatcher or from our website, it uses that link to the MP3 file. And that link doesn't exist because they changed the prefix link. So every single episode that we have posted from episode 52, when we started hosting it on Squarespace, it doesn't work. So... But basically, it's an easy fix, but just a long, monotonous fix. I'm going to go back to every single episode we've ever posted since 52 and change that prefix link to make them work. So right now, all I did was the last episode, I changed the prefix links. The last episode works fine. This next episode, everything going forward will work just fine. It's just going to take me a little bit to go back and just get our back catalog up and running again. Very upsetting, but I really appreciate Ian bringing it to my attention, showing me that
Thank you, Ian. Yeah. That was so hard, and Jarman, sorry, that sucks so bad.
It does suck, especially because I'm like, hey, that's our back catalog you're messing with, man.
I mean, we can't lose it. If this is our legacy at this point.
Well,
dude.
Our back catalog is not only on a server in my room, it's also on the cloud, so it's double backed up in two different places. Good. So if the internet loses it, it's backed up in a different cloud and a server, so it's safe forever.
All right.
That's our feedback. Thanks, Ian Cohen. So, Steven, let's get in the actual episode here. What's going on with Carol Burnett?
Oh, man. She is an American actress, star, and comedic icon, to say the least. Mm-hmm. She had her own variety show that ran for many seasons, and it was one of the first to be piloted by a woman and was incredibly successful. She did some time on Broadway. She's done movies, accolades to her name. She was nominated for 23 Primetime Emmy Awards. She won 6.
Damn.
Yeah, greedy. She also tacked on a Tony and a Grammy in there somewhere, just to seal it in. And she is still alive at 90 years old. Really, she did kind of step out of the limelight, 10 to 15 years ago. She still has done one episode appearances and quick things.
Better Call Saul.
Better Call Saul most recently. But otherwise, she's just living as an icon.
Yeah.
It's like she's living that Bill Murray life, like, what are you going to do now? You've done it.
Just relax.
Sit in it. Steve Martin. She's up there with those guys.
Yep.
And she's like 10 years older than them.
Yeah. She's a legend to them. Exactly.
That's right. She was around. But what's she up to this week on the Muppet Show? Well, this was a long description because we had another week where the backstage and onstage melded.
Yeah.
Backstage this week, Carol is there and she's informed that there's just a big dance contest, not just on the show, but backstage as well. Carol is very dissatisfied with the show that week. She meets her new partner, which is Animal, for the dance contest, and she's just forced down on the stage. Gonzo changes the tempo to a twist. Carol confronts Kermit about how crap this is, and it's a blowout. She's then dragged off by Animal again. Gonzo comes backstage from on stage, finds Kermit loading out pigs in space because Kermit wants to make it up to Carol that she didn't get to do a variety show. Meanwhile, Carol's in her dressing room. She is distraught and she's angry and she's packing and she threatens Kermit she's going to leave. But he asks, like, will you do your famous asparagus sketch? And she's like, yes, I'll do my famous asparagus sketch. Carol changes and then assaults Scooter. But then Kermit breaks it that she can only go on after all the dancers have collapsed and are done. So she charges on stage once again. On stage, like what the audience saw this week is the dance contest, which is kind of an upgraded At the Dance.
Yeah, it's a dance marathon. That
Animal and Carol come out onto the dance floor. Animal is dancing insanely. Gonzo and Kermit hit the stage dancing together. When a siren hits and the competition has begun, Kermit finally introduces Carol. She performs Watch What Happens, clearly annoyed as the competition comes back onto stage, the style changing to the polka, and she is angry but gives it her best, and Animal wants to dance just the whole time. Carol charges off stage at this point. The dance goes on. Carol returns with Animal. The tempo changes again to like the old At the Dance. We get some good classic banter and jokes.
Puns.
Gonzo changes the tempo again to a ragtime style music. Suddenly, Pigs in Space takes the stage. Piggy is eaten by a monster, but she continues the dance contest in its stomach. The dancers come back and sing the Poke Me Polka while they assault one another. The tempo finally drops for the contestants to something a little slower. Carol's janitor character from the Carol Burnett Show reveals that she's dancing with her mop. And it kind of reminded me of George, the janitor from the Muppet Valentine special, where he loves his mop.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of that. Kermit and Piggy dance together once more. Piggy makes a pass at Kermit. Kermit tries to cool her down. An ambulance arrives. Presumably someone is terribly hurt. But now it's time for the limbo. A rest is called. The music starts back up, and we see Carol's janitor character. She sings, But Not For Me. It's a nice, like, sincere number and a sweeter moment. Carol storms the stage, dressed as an asparagus for some reason. She takes over the marathon and sings I Was Made for Dancing all night long. She picks up the tempo continuously, driving the dancers into a fevered pace until all but two of them collapse. Winners are pronounced. Everyone else has dropped. Kermit thanks Carol one last time. Dr. Bunsen Honeydew made dancing robots that won the competition. Carol is outraged that they skipped her sketch and she does not get to do the lonely asparagus. And that is what we call the Muppet Show.
And no one wins because they were robots that are disqualified.
Yeah, disqualified. So doesn't count. They don't have souls, so they can't win. There's one thing I know about dancing is you got to have soul.
Yeah, soul. That's true. I do not have it.
No, it's just that your hips are fused in a weird way.
Because I'm white.
So what did you think of this week's episode of Carol Burnett?
I really enjoyed this episode. And the first thing I will say, though, is that it's a weird double-edged sword because I was disappointed that we didn't get to see more of Carol Burnett doing actual sketches, what she's really known for. But at the same time, that's kind of the whole joke of the episode is that she never got to do a real sketch. So I can't really be mad at it for that. But I was just like, oh, but I share her frustration because I also wanted her to get to do a sketch. I don't know.
I liked I like that they then took that though, but then engaged in the backstage plot.
Right. And that's why I think I still really liked it because she interacted with Muppets so well and she interacted with the premise so well. She stayed to her character of being herself and pissed that she couldn't do a sketch. So it really worked. The same thing that was frustrating me is what was frustrating her. So I felt the catharsis there, if that makes sense. But then it was kind of weird. But then I had no idea because I'd not really seen much of the Carol Burnett Show that she's such a good singer. She was a fantastic singer.
Oh, she was great.
Yeah, and she can dance and she can sing. She's funny. She did the costume changes. I mean, it was just like it kept going and moving, especially because of Gonzo keeping that whistle blowing and keeping things changing up. That episode went by real fast.
Even the mechanism of the episode, you're right, drove it in a way that no other episode has, where like everything literally led into the next thing.
Like you can see backstage, as soon as something's over, Kermit's pushing stuff on stage. Like this is how it would feel like for a show coming on this fast, you know? Yeah, it really, so I can't be mad at it for that small disappointment that I had, because it kind of worked itself into the episode. So, I mean, I don't know. This is top of the season for me so far. Well, not the top, but one of the tops. What do you think, Steve?
I agree. And as I said, like we just had two real good ones.
We did.
They were getting spoiled. The next one, the Glass Knight one, is like a number one.
Oh, wow. Okay.
On most people's top Muppet lists, Muppet Show list, it is up there.
I'm excited.
It's for a reason. And the one thing I'm loving about this season that we're seeing more and more, and I don't know why it's suddenly coming on, is backstage plots taking over and mingling with the main plots. And I'm digging it.
I feel like they maybe did a couple movies at this point. They're getting used to making a narrative more for each episode, as opposed to just kind of disjointed things that don't connect. Because you're right. It's like
driving with more characters.
Right. The longer this goes on, the better they're getting at doing an arc for each episode and making that happen.
Yeah. So they've learned lessons. You're absolutely right. That's what we're feeling.
Yep. And sad this is the last season.
But it means we get, as I said, we've got of the last 10 or 12, we've got 5 or 6 real classic top episodes coming up.
Heck yeah.
So we're in for a good one. I think we're in for a difficult top 3 when we get there.
Yeah, I like that problem. It's a good problem to have.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have. Some music this week. Watch What Happens. Originally a French hit called Récit de Cassar. Jacques Demy. He was an Academy Award-winning songwriter. He died in 1990, which was reported as cancer, but then 18 years later, it came out of the woodwork that he actually died of AIDS. But it was in the 90s, so it was just a different climate.
Mm-hmm.
The Poke Me Polka from Not That Ray Charles, as he publishes himself, music associate for the late seasons of the Muppets. He also wrote Bluefish Blues and Falling from previous episodes, like the Brooke Shields episode.
I like the Falling one. That was good.
But Not For Me, written by the Gershwins for musical Girl Crazy. Ella Fitzgerald's version of it won the 1960 Grammy for Best Female Vocal Performance.
And Judy Garland sang it in the movie Girl Crazy. So, yeah, it's a classic.
I Was Made for Dancing, made popular by Leif Garrett. This hit its highest points elsewhere internationally and hit a lot of high spots. Number 2 in Australia, number 12 in England, number 8 here, but didn't hit the top spot anywhere quite. Just didn't quite go up to the top. And he was actually a child actor who did a short stint in music. He was most famously in the movie The Outsiders.
Oh, okay.
Leif Garrett.
I know the name.
So, Jordan, what did you think was the best Muppeteering moment this week?
So I have to say the whole thing's pretty impressive because they had so many Muppets on stage throughout the whole episode. But one little thing just made me realize, I know that was pretty simple, but probably was really difficult to actually pull off really well, was Miss Piggy getting swallowed by the big monster. Because I saw the filmmaking cuts they had to do to like cut away just at the right time to then cut back to where her legs are sticking out. And like, then she's inside and she peeps her head out and she does some dancing inside. Like that was just a lot of coordination and for something that seemed simple, but seemed very complicated.
Wow. I mean, you're absolutely right. I like that in these later seasons, you're noticing more nuanced things.
Oh, yeah.
Recently, you've had much more nuanced choices.
I appreciate that.
Well, I loved, and I've got to give it to Frank Oz's animal in this episode. Not only was it a high energy episode and probably involved a lot of performance from everyone involved, but then you have Frank Oz who has to do it as manic animal for who knows how many takes, like dancing around and jumping around and shaking animal and like doing these things. And then having to do stuff as Piggy as well. So I'm going to give it to Frank Oz, specifically as animal, to be the highest energy character in a high energy episode takes work.
Oh, you know, he was stinky sweaty after this episode.
You better know that all these guys were stinky sweaty.
Oh, they all such long hair and beards too. It's just gross.
Oh yeah. It was a different time, man.
Different time.
So, Jarman, what happened on this week's episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation?
So this week we had the episode Haven, and has the Enterprise arriving at the planet Haven, apparently because they have been summoned there by Deanna Troi's mother. So a whole ship of 400 people has to go run an errand for one person on the ship for some reason. But anyways, Troi had apparently not long ago, or had long ago been promised a way to marry the son of a family best friend. And this son, Wyatt, and his parents are set to meet them there at Haven so that they can get married. And Lwaxana Troi, Deanna's mother, and Wyatt and his parents, the Millers, all come aboard the Enterprise for the marriage to happen. And the parents are immediately bickering with each other about how the wedding should be held in either a classic Beta Z fashion where everyone is naked at the ceremony or a traditional Earth wedding ceremony. So they fight about that. But meanwhile, Wyatt and Troi get some alone time together to get to know one another. And they find out that Deanna still has something going on with Riker, and Wyatt apparently has an imaginary dream woman he's been lusting after since he was a child, and he's been drawing and painting pictures of her ever since. And he keeps them with him everywhere he goes, like with like Schroeder's blanket from Peanuts, basically. It's like his little comfort animal. And he initially thought when he met his future wife, Deanna, that she would be the same dream woman because it made sense in his mind. They're fated to be together. But the dream woman is actually a blonde with big 80s hair, so it definitely isn't Deanna. But he still likes Deanna, and he seems like a nice enough guy, so they still are going to go through with the marriage. But just then, the Enterprise sees a Talarian ship approaching the planet, and they won't communicate to say what their intentions are. And if you don't know who the Talarians are, don't worry, because the episode is about to give you a huge exposition dump in a huge staff meeting that we have. It's just 5 minutes of them rattling out what the Talarians are.
Oh, they dump all over.
Oh, they dump all over that staff meeting.
For sure.
So we learn that the Talarians are a race of people that long ago killed each other on their planet with biological weapons, and it gave all of them an infectious, deadly disease. So now the last ones that are roaming the galaxy on their ships, they're getting shot out of space before they can land anywhere because the people on each planet fear they might infect their local populations. And when they're finally able to talk to this ship, the Enterprise, they learn that this small group of 8 Talarians has been traveling for some time to get here to Haven to find a small piece of land where they can just live out their final days in peace. But who do we find out is on the Talarian ship? It's the mystery 80s era blonde woman from Wyatt's dreams. So Wyatt and Ariana are seeing each other through the view screen, and there's definitely some connection and magic happening there. And apparently they've both been dreaming of each other all these years. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention that Wyatt is also a doctor. So he wants to work with Dr. Crusher to make a cure for the Talarian people.
Who just coincidentally studied infectious virology.
Yeah, weird.
How convenient.
It's like maybe the dreams or something made him do that growing up. Who knows? But as soon as they gather the supplies they need to make the cure, he transports himself over to the Talarian vessel, dooming himself to their infection. And he tells Deanna via the view screen that he must go off to be with his dream woman and to find a cure for them. And Deanna seems to understand, and Wyatt flies off with them into space. And there's also scenes of Riker throughout the episode being upset and jealous. And there's a hilarious dinner scene with Lurch as a footman getting drunk. And tons of sex jokes from Lwaxana. So overall, that's the whole episode. So Steve, what'd you think of this one?
All right. So some things I liked. I thought it was a great example of, this felt sort of almost parallel to the Muppet Show episode in that it was the subplot driving the main plot.
Yeah.
Or most of the B plot really taking over.
They connected for sure.
And I dug that. I love that everyone kind of had a reason to be there in that regard. That they sort of play that fate aspect. It was his destiny, I think, is the word they throw around a few times.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like that it was sort of like everyone had to be there and had to be the right person. Like I like that there was no extra, really.
No Wesley Crusher.
No Wesley. The one exception being Lurch, who was a little bit extra,
but hilarious.
An interesting sort of way. Yes. Let's see what else. Then I love that Deanna's. I've complained about this before. That Deanna Troi is like kind of like a get out of jail free card in that she can like feel her way out of things or just kind of magically know things that no one really possibly could. And they use it as a crutch almost. It's like her and Wesley are the big crutches.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that this was the first time where we really got a snapshot of like what it's like for her.
As a real character, not just like
as a real character and not just a plot device.
Yeah.
And just her having, like even the reveal that like she knows exactly what Riker's feeling, and that she has to feel his heart boner on his shoulder all the time. Wear that right on his sleeve there.
A big old heart boner.
And she just knows it. She knows about the heart boner. And so there was that, which I thought was just an interesting thing we really haven't gotten to see before, besides their like really awkward interactions that we've gotten to see a few of. So some things I found unnecessary. The giant, I know that you loved him. He was really unnecessary and just felt like an add-on. Bring anything to the story besides random antics.
I agree. He could have had some kind of purpose they could have brought out in the last moment or something. You're right. He didn't that's fair.
And if anything, what I kind of wished, and they almost played it around with it, was wouldn't it be funny if Data got assigned to her as her body man?
That's true.
And so her overt sexuality and all that with Data.
Because she couldn't read him or anything. So that would be
right. Yeah. And so that would be a fun angle. And we get to see him like be flirted with and not know what to do and be all Data-y and shit. Like that would have been fun. I would have paid to watch that.
And we still had some Data moments at least with like them at dinner, like interacting with the giant and stuff like that.
We did. You're not wrong. And then my other issue is a little bit with pacing, or I guess probably what I would define as pacing. In that they find out about this alien race. We get that really long exposition scene that I understand had to happen, but you're right, it was really long. And then it's heightened tensions. Oh my God, they're heading here. Well, but I guess we have time for a formal dinner, huh? And then when they stop and they have the dinner, and then there's the holodeck scene with Riker and her, and then the guy shows up. Wyatt shows up, and then there's the second half of the holodeck scene, and all of that happens while everyone's just kind of like pausing the impending doom that's heading to this planet.
That's a good point.
So incredibly anticlimactic, and like they just should have ordered the episode a little bit.
They should have the episode a little bit? You cut out.
They should have reordered the episode a little bit.
Gotcha. I agree with that.
And so it's just one of those things where once again, I felt like a missed opportunity, and it felt weird to take such a big, long break in such a dire situation.
Yeah, it's like bad editing, either script editing or just editing in general for a video editing or something.
So yeah, those are really my issues. But overall, I really did enjoy this episode. I know I'm nitpicking, but
oh yeah, that's what we're here for. Here to nitpick.
This is probably one of my favorite ones so far, realistically.
I thought the same thing.
The building we got with her, and then of course you get Majel Barrett in there.
Yeah,
like you gotta hail to the queen. The
voice of the computer, Roddenberry's wife.
Yeah, I mean, so like I get that aspect of it as well. I do.
Yeah, I really liked that. Like you said, the relationship building. We saw a lot of like fleshing out kind of the what's really going on with Troi and Riker. What are their feelings with each other? And we see that Riker really still has real strong feelings for her. It's not just awkward. He really has feelings for her. And I love how he just came off of being on soap operas before this gig. So you can tell his soap opera acting was like in full force here. I feel like it worked pretty well. I loved you once. But also the guest actor, I can't not go mention him though. He was great. Because there was so much screen time.
I've ever seen him not play a dick, that actor.
Yeah, his name is Robert Nepper, playing Wyatt, and he was a big guy in season 4 of Heroes. He played Samuel Sullivan, kind of like the main villain of season 4 that did not do so well, but he was great in that character.
He was. I know him from Prison Break primarily, and he was great in that.
I hadn't seen Prison Break, but yeah, it said he was big in that.
And then he was in a good episode of The Orville as well.
Oh, nice.
So
he was also in a show we're watching right now. I literally just saw an episode with him as I was eating dinner of iZombie. He was in it for like 3 seasons as Agnes McDonough. So he's in a lot of stuff sci-fi fantasy stuff. So
he is a working actor.
But I feel like it was great they cast somebody with actual acting chops for that part because they had so much screen time on that Wyatt character. So they needed to have somebody who was decent.
They did. And they had to make it seem feasible that he could outdo Riker.
Yeah, he was the total opposite personality. He was like,
I like that they didn't choose a guy to make him play macho.
He was just a nice, artistic, sweet guy.
And like, yeah, and then the fact that they made him like a doctor and like a humanitarian kind of like that was all real smart stuff. They didn't come at the angle that they could have.
Yeah, even especially in the holodeck,
a guy come in.
Because like they had the holodeck showing the two of them together, like Riker's standing there, this giant chest puffed out, and he's like standing there, with his long hair. He's like, "Hey man, how you doing?" Like it's just like totally opposites. You're right. Yeah, and also I thought Jolie, my wife, brought up that when we watched it, that I think you kind of touched on this, that they didn't really explain the main crux of this episode very well, their connection and why he was dreaming of her. Because the only explanation we got was from Lwaxana Troi. She says, well, this whole universe is connected. That's why you were dreaming of each other all this time. And I was like, that's the only explanation we're going to get? That's not really great. So I didn't like that. But other than that, it was okay.
Well, yeah. He's like a learned doctor, presumably with, a decade of training in him. And she's like, life and consciousness is intertwined. He's like, of course, I've always...
Why did I think of that?
Oh my God, like a self-evident truth that's come to him in two lines of dialogue. A self-evident truth.
In a vagity that meant nothing.
Nothing. I'm 100% with you on that.
So that was disappointing for me, but otherwise I still enjoyed it. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Well, for trivia for this episode, this is the second Star Trek appearance of Armin Shimmerman, who will later play Quark. I didn't realize this, but he was the face of the talking gift box in the beginning.
I couldn't find him in the IMDb page, and I felt like I was going nuts. I was like, that was him, right?
He's uncredited, but yeah, it's definitely him. This is the second and last episode in which Commander Riker is referred to as Bill. From now on, he's called Will Riker instead of Bill Riker. So, same name, but just different way of saying it. This episode features the only usage of the Enterprise D's dining room. In future seasons, all formal events would always be hosted at 10 forward, most frequently. This is the last time you'll see that dining room ever again. And as you mentioned, even though Majel Barrett is known as the computer voice of the Trek universe, she made her first appearance as a flamboyant Lwaxana Troi a full year before she was credited as the voice of the computer. So they haven't even credited her yet as the voice, but she's been that voice this whole time. Dennis McCarthy, who composed the score for this episode, noted that Rick Berman, the producer, strongly disliked his approach to this episode, so much so that McCarthy was certain he was going to be fired, which I thought that was funny because I actually happened to notice the music was much better in this episode. It was much less obtrusive and annoying than the previous episodes, so I liked the music in this episode. Robert Ellenstein, who played Wyatt's dad, had previously played the Federation president in Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, the whale movie.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I didn't recognize him from that. This is a funny one that's kind of a big part of Star Trek Next Generation is Lwaxana makes mention of Deanna's accent and says it reminds her of Deanna's father. And later in the series, when Deanna's father appears, he speaks with an American accent. So Marina Sirtis has said in numerous interviews and convention appearances that the accent she affected in the early days of TNG was at the insistence of the show's producers, who did not want the Enterprise's bridge to be seen too English, because Patrick Stewart already was speaking with a British accent, despite portraying a French character. And when she asked for an explanation for the accent, she was told it was a Beta Z accent, the kind of weird, almost Greek-sounding accent she has. And when Lwaxana appeared and did not have that accent, her mother, she again went to the producers for an explanation, and they told her, oh, Deanna got her accent from her father. And then when Deanna's father appeared and did not have the accent, she was told that Deanna went away to school and picked it up there. So Sirtis was eventually allowed to perform with her natural English accent, according to this. But as far as I can tell, even up to the movies, she still has that kind of odd, slightly off Greek-sounding accent. I don't know. It's weird.
You're right. It is slightly off.
It's just, but I like her choice that it's just off enough to be kind of alien and different. But it's just
like make me feel uncomfortable. Yeah.
So anyways, Steve, what are our Trek Connection, Muppet Connections this time?
Oh boy. Well, the Burnett show ran for many seasons, and on it they did many sketches, including one that was a Star Trek parody. Original series. I watched it, and it was a little problematic. It would not do good on TV. And then I think I've mentioned this one before. At some point, Leonard Nimoy as Spock once did an appearance on the Carol Burnett show, showing up as a joke about like Dr. Spock and giving a baby an invisibility potion or something. It's real weird.
Okay,
check it out. Okay, so now this one's deep cut. Shatner had a show called Shatner's Raw Nerve.
Oh, yeah.
3 years, and it was a celebrity interview show where he supposedly had no notes and asked deep questions. Season 3 only had 2 episodes, and one of them was Carol Burnett.
Hey.
And then finally, Carol Stroiken, the giant man, the giant who's been a working man in Hollywood for decades now, was an Ewok in the Battle for Endor. Was in the Ewoks.
I was going to say, he's huge.
Right. He played Sarek. I read that wrong word. He was an Ewok. He played Sarek, the big baddie from Ewoks Battle for Endor, featuring Ewoks, small, majestic Star Wars creatures featured in Return of the Jedi. Another such small, majestic creature featured in Return of the Jedi is Yoda, voiced by Frank Oz, voice of Piggy and Jim Henson's right hand.
There you go. Perfect.
Carol Stroiken was in so many things. He's been in so many diverse things. It did not take me long to find like a semi-tangible connection. Yeah,
I think Lurch was probably his most popular, famous one, being from the movies.
And that's how he's connected to Mr. Raul Julia.
That's correct. So these are basically the same episode because both have characters being forced into something they did not want to do. We have Carol Burnett being forced to dance in the dance competition and Deanna Troi having to marry Wyatt.
I said something very similar in that both feature people taking on a sudden and unsuspected new partner. Wyatt, and then pivoting for his dream girl, Ariana, and then Carol suddenly being set up with Animal for the dance contest.
Oh, I had the same exact one except for Kermit leaving Gonzo to dance with Miss Piggy.
Love it. Both have people who refuse to proceed until everyone is gone. Loxana Troi refuses to transport until the groom's parents are gone, and Carol is unable to do her asparagus sketch until the dancers are all finished.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. I like it. Oh, God. What's that noise?
Transporter malfunction. Transporter malfunction.
Whew. Well, it's a part of the show where we transport one character from one episode to the other, and then vice versa. So what you got for us, Steve?
I tried to Muppets this week. I'm going to bring over Wyatt's mother, Victoria Miller, all stern and uptight, and replace Carol's cleaning lady character, just standing at the side of the stage, balking at the audacity of the show and looking uptight as hell.
That works well.
Wearing that funny, weird flip-up hat.
I'd have Loxana Troi come over to replace Carol Burnett, and not because Carol Burnett did a bad job, but because I feel like she would bring a similar energy to the whole episode, and it would have played out almost exactly the same as it did.
That's fair. That's very fair. MuppeTrek, I'm going to bring over the monster from Pigs in Space and replace the manservant, the big guy, storing Loxana's things in his mouth and stomach and then pulling them out as she needs them.
He's almost like a bag of holding.
Yeah, he's like a walking bag of holding.
I like it.
Dude, that would be a cool item.
Muppets of Trek, I'm going to have Link Hogthrob to come over and replace Ariana the Tellarian, because I think it would be hilarious if after all this time, Wyatt's had this dream lover he hopes to meet one day. It turns out to be a space pig. And it's like, he's actually happy with it. He's like, oh my God, it's you.
I've been drawing you for years, Link.
Oh, I know. I'm so happy to see you too. That would be amazing. So that brings us to the end of episode 113 of the MuppeTrek Podcast.
Join us next time for the Muppet Show with special guest Gladys Knight.
And the Next Generation episode, The Big Goodbye, see?
So from the lovers, the dreamers, and us.
Live long and prosper, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the MuppeTrek Podcast. Be sure to follow us on social media on Facebook and Twitter.
Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform.
This podcast has been brought to you by A Play on Nerds.